What's up, everybody? Undead here again with another Survival Hunter video for Season 2 of Dragonflight. And today we're going to be talking about gearing. So with that, we'll be briefly talking about what stats you want on your gear. We'll talk about embellishments and which crafted pieces you should make. And then we'll talk about trinkets from the Raid and Mythic Plus, which ones are good, which ones are not so good, which ones are underrated and you can get a lot of mileage out of. So that's our plan for today. But first, I want to go into just real briefly what you should do if you just leveled your character. Like, say this is survival's an alt that you're rolling up. You're like, oh man, this looks fun. Let me try this out. Let me level my guy. You hit level 70, and now you don't know what to do, right? It's kind of an overwhelming situation when you're a new character. You have no gear, but your max level. It's like, man, where do I start? What do I do? And I have some experience with this because the last 2 weeks I've spent almost all just playing alts. I haven't really been playing, or at least haven't been pushing keys on my hunter much at all. I've been trying to get my alts caught up. We're at like a good place in the season to do that, so that the rest of the season I can just kind of play my hunter and do my weekly stuff on alts, and that's it. So with that, I have figured out how to gear pretty quick. I got a warrior up to 440, a druid up to 435. My rogue I leveled up 2 days ago. So not last night, but the night before is when I started gearing him, and he's 425 already. So I think I've gotten pretty good at gearing these guys pretty quick. The system this season is really good at helping you do that. But you need a starting point. And that's why I'm at the auction house, because I want to show you where to start. As long as you have 5,000 gold, which I think you probably do. Maybe I'm the corrupted 1%, and I don't realize how poor everybody else actually is. I feel like I'm poor. But if you have 5,000 gold, you come to the auction house, you search your armor type. This goes for all armor types, not just mail. And then you scroll down here, and you see these 376 pieces. You just buy them all. And now you got 376 in every item slot. Do not buy the 379s. I do not know why these are more expensive. They might have different transmog or something, but they're on the same upgrade track. So like all these can be upgraded to 398, which is the big value of them. It gets you really close to just being ready to do whatever content. You can get into the plus 11 to 15 range of keys and be relevant. Normal raid, you can be relevant at around 398 and do just fine. So buy the cheaper ones. That goes for, you have to go to miscellaneous and then cloak, necklace, and finger to get your ring, necklace, and cloak. And then trinkets, there's a couple options in here. Obviously, you can see what I recommend for melee classes is the haste PvP trinket that procs main stats. So this one up here, combatant's insignia of alacrity, and then Drogbar rocks. And again, you can grab the cheaper one, the 376, rather than the 379. This trinket's actually so good that they were considering playing this in the Race to World first. They were like, man, should we just run this on everybody? Like, this is really good single target damage, especially because this can show up as a world quest too that can then be upgraded to 411, which is the same with all this gear. So check your world quest, see if there's stuff as you start getting more gear that you want to pick up. For casters, I don't know because I don't care. Buy whatever you want. Probably something ranged offensive abilities. Yeah, that seems good. Suspended sulfuric droplet. This is probably fine. If you're a wizard, consider re-rolling off a wizard though. You'll make more friends. So that's where I would start with my gearing process. And then as you start doing keys and you start getting your sparks, you can start thinking about what you want to make for your crafted gear. And important to think about that next week, and we'll go down here and just kind of pull up the different crafted items, talk about what I think about them. Next week or tomorrow for North America, I guess EU will be 2 days, Asia 3 more days from here. We'll be picking up our 4th spark, which is an important breakpoint for gearing a new character, in my opinion, in that I would recommend making a weapon because of this. Up until this 4th spark, I would have skipped on the weapon, so you could get 2 of your good embellishment items, and then 1 other item. But pulling up and having 4 sparks available means you can craft a weapon, because the 2-handed weapon for survival costs 2 sparks. It's not just 1 spark for it, it's 2. So it's a little bit limiting in that sense, but it'll get you rolling quickly, and your character will be relevant very quick. So since we're talking about what crafted pieces we're making, we need to understand what our stats are and what our best stats are, because you can pick your best stats, right? You go into two-handed, let's make a two-handed halberd, and in here, there's an option to raise the item level, but here we can pick our stats. And in our situation, when we make haste crit, generally for survival, when you're picking pieces of gear that are equal item level, your choices will be pick the one that has the most haste and the least mastery. So ideally that means 0 mastery and a heavy hasted piece. If you have to choose, like if they're both heavy haste, they both have 0 mastery, and you have to choose between crit and verse, we lean crit. Crit is definitely a better DPS stat than verse for us right now. But verse is fine. Your piece is not scuffed if it has haste verse on it instead of haste crit. So you favor haste, then crit, then verse, then mastery. Ideally, 0 mastery on your gear. It is okay in single target, but in AoE it loses a lot of value because primary damage dealer in AoE is going to be our bombs, and mastery doesn't scale bombs at all. It just doesn't. It affects our focus spending abilities, and bombs don't cost focus, so the stat just skips them. So with that, when you're crafting your crafted items, assuming you have the choice, because some of these pieces you won't be able to pick which stats you want on them, if you have the option to choose the stats, you should choose haste crit on all these items. So what embellishments should we be wearing? We can wear 2 offensive embellishments at any given time. So 2 of your crafted pieces here will be items that have embellishments on them. It's just a matter of picking the ones you want to wear. Now, I'll talk about what I'm wearing right now. So I wear boots and belt, and I wear the Shadow Flame patch as my embellishment. This is just a passive damage. It's primarily useful on single target because it's a stacking effect. So on AoE, it doesn't take, if you're target swapping at all, it really doesn't have time to stack up and do more damage, especially because you're leaving combat faster too. Bosses are typically longer fights than your AoE trash pulls, so you're able to get more value out of the bosses. So this was a dungeon. I don't actually remember how this dungeon went. It was a 23 Uldaman. I don't remember if there was any weird things about this dungeon that would have made this off as far as damage, but this seems normal. I usually get about 3% damage overall out of my 2 Shadow Flame patches. It's just passive damage. You don't think about it. You put it on your gear and bam, you're doing more damage. Now, there is a higher damage option available than this, but I'm not wearing it, which may seem weird, but let's get into it. The Acidic Hailstone Treads are more damage than the Rousing Shadow Flame patch, for sure. How much more damage is not that much for each piece that... excuse me. Each piece... and I say each piece because you can enhance this with one of your other pieces that you're getting this benefit from is going to be about 0.5%, maybe 1% more damage. In most cases, it's about 0.5%. So the negative side of this is when you wear these boots, you're slowed by 10%. And then you can double the amount of damage the boots do by wearing a toxic patch on one of your other pieces. So in the situation, I would still do boots and belt. So these would be your boots, and then on your belt you would put the toxic patch instead of the Shadow Flame patch, and that doubles the damage it does, but it also doubles the slow effect. So instead of a 10% slow, you're now dealing with a 20% slow all the time, and I'm never doing that. I I don't know if any of you remember the last season of Shadowland, or not Shadowlands, BFA. Would have been season 4? Season 4 of BFA. With corruption, you would randomly get slowed, and the amount of little baby rage hissy fits I would have over being slowed, man, I'm not opting into it ever again. I'll take the 0.5% damage loss. Not interested. Sorry, dog. It's not happening, especially in Mythic Plus. Now, in Raid, it's a little bit of a different story. So if you're trying to gear just for Raid, I could consider going with these, and it's fine because Disengage and Harpoon cover most of your mobility in Raid. There's not really a lot of super high mobility requirements in this current Raid in Aberrus. So if you're primarily a Raider, you don't give a shit about Mythic Plus, give them a shot. If you care about Mythic Plus, I don't recommend them because they also affect your mount speed too. So like even traveling around the world, your mount speed is slower. Your everything you do is just slower, and I can't take it. Like I can't take it. I'm at the point where like putting avoidance, it pains me to put avoidance and chance on my gear because I want to put speed and chance on them instead. I love moving fast, But maybe you don't care and you just want to do more damage. So that's what you wear if you want to do more damage. Otherwise, I recommend the Rousing Shadow Flame. Now, your next piece, if you're starting a fresh new character, I think you just send it on a weapon. So you go to two-handed weapon. You can choose between either the axe or the polearm. They're the same. They're just the two agility options for you. It's a matter of transmog, really. So it doesn't matter which one you want to do. You just pick one of those and then put crit haste on it and level it up to 447 when you get your enchanted aspect crest. Now, at first you won't have these, right? You'll have to get into the higher mythic plus keys starting at 16 before you can do this. But at rank 1, this is still going to be about a 420, 424 weapon, depending on if you're craft or high rolls, which is a good start. And then the 447 is your long-term. There's only one weapon in the game better than this, and it's a mythic Rashok weapon, which I have the heroic version right now, but even I would replace this with a 447 weapon. I chose to do a little bit differently on my crafted stuff because of the chance I could get a weapon out of my vault, and there's other stuff that would not be replaceable, in my opinion. So for you guys, though, I think if you're doing a fresh new character, send the weapon. It's a huge power gain right off the bat, and part of me is a little bit regretful that I didn't save for it, but we'll see. I'm just gonna get one out of my vault this week. It'll be fine. I'll get the Brackenhide Hollow weapon out of my vault just fine. Now there are a couple other options for embellishments worth thinking about at least just knowing they exist. One being the 2 set. It's called like the Winds Horizon Wind or something 2 set. Let me see. The Horizon Strider's garments. Now there are 3 separate items that this set involves, and you need to wear 2 of them. So they're belt, shoulders, and gloves. On pure AoE, this set should be a bit higher damage than Rousing Shadow Flame or the Acidic Hailstone boots. On single target, it is significantly worse than either of those options. Like garbage in comparison, but a little bit better on AoE. Also involves you running suboptimal stats in other slots, right? So you have to wear the belt because you can't, if you wear shoulders and gloves, you don't have 4-piece now. So you can't do that. So you have to wear the belt. The belt itself is heavy mastery, which we talked about earlier. Not good. Don't want that. And then your gloves and shoulders are actually 2 of our good tier pieces, right? We have heavy haste on both of these, which means we're dropping a good tier piece in place of a bad tier piece. Our chest is heavy mastery, and our pants has mastery on it with no haste or crit, right? So ideally, we don't want to wear one of these, right? You want to drop pants or you want to drop chest, depending on what good off piece you can get there. But if you wear this 2 set, now you have to wear both of them, which puts your stats in a place that is not great. Maybe I'll change my mind on this long term, but I get some questions about this from some people that have played in the previous season, or have played other male classes like Enhancement Shaman likes this quite a bit. So just to cover that, I don't recommend it. I don't think I'm going to recommend it at all this season. We'll see what happens. Maybe, you know what I mean? Things change. Sometimes you experiment with stuff and you find out things aren't quite what they seem, but I think it's pretty safe to just skip this and not think about crafting this at all this season. Our next option for damage, which I think is a craft this much later, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to craft this later and try it out when I get enough sockets, is good old Elemental Lariat. This has been nerfed since last season, so it's not an auto-select for everybody anymore. But once you get enough gems to enhance this proc, basically the buff is longer the more gems you have in your gear. So once you get enough gems, which I have about half of the possible gems right now, so definitely not wearing this yet. I think this is going to catch up and overtake the second Shadow Flame for Mythic Plus. You probably won't wear it in Raid, but in Mythic Plus, I think the raw stats of this are going to be better overall. But we'll see. This is, again, I probably craft this like a month from now, 2 weeks to a month from now, something like that is probably when I make this. So I would not be worried about this for you guys currently. It also has the benefit of being a necklace you can put whatever stats on it you want. There aren't great necklaces available for us this patch. There's good necklaces, but not great ones. The Assault is a Kali necklace from the Raid is crit haste, but it's heavy crit instead of heavy haste. And there's a necklace from Vortex Pinnacle that's haste verse, but it's heavy verse, not heavy haste. So there's not the best options. This at least gives you even haste and crit, or haste and verse. I would recommend haste crit. And then obviously the embellishment bonus here. So think about this long term. I wouldn't craft it early, but it's worth being like, oh, you know what? Later I'll fill out my next slot with that, right? Like if you're considering, I think this becomes important to like think about these future decisions when you're considering your vault choices, right? Like the vault items are usually going to be the highest item level stuff you have access to, unless you're clearing the whole raid on Mythic, which even this patch I'm not even doing. I'm not raiding this patch. So like my vault options, I have very serious decisions to make about my vault options, right? So if given a necklace and another item, even if it's a perfect necklace, right? Like a 447 Vortex Pinnacle necklace, if there's another viable option, I probably skip it because I know it's pretty likely I'm crafting my Lariat later on in the season to fill that hole. So worth thinking about a little bit in that regard. Then there's one more option. Actually, two more things I want to talk about. But one more here. This is going to be a very niche decision to craft this. It's the Undulating Spore Cloak. This is purely defensive. This does no damage whatsoever. But if you are pushing the highest Mythic Plus keys, which I don't know if any of you watching this are, or if you're out there making content, or if you're just like, dude, this guy has no idea what I'm talking about. I got more IO than him. If you're that guy and you're pushing the highest keys possible, this might end up being worth it. Right now in Mythic Plus, it seems like a lot of dungeons are more about surviving than they are about doing damage. So sacrificing a little bit damage to make it so that you survive some situations you might not have previously is something to consider. It's not like I would never do that. It's maybe I would do that situation. Basically what this does is it's a small heal when you're above 70% health, and when you drop to 30%, you get a huge shield. Similar to something like Nature's Guardian that shamans have, where they heal when they drop below 35%, except this is a massive shield. 2-minute cooldown, just procs whenever it happens. Can be good in some situations, can also be wasted in some situations. So worth thinking about, but again, this is not an early craft. This is like a later on, like, let me try this out and see if it's good. Now, last thing we'll talk about with crafted gear is if you are an engineer and you're considering making the engineering items. These allow you to have battle res. The only way to have battle res right now is to technically you don't need engineering, but without engineering, your failure rate on the battle res is going to be pretty significant, and basically just don't bother. Like, just don't. Like, who cares, dude? Just don't even bother. But that involves making either the helm or bracers from engineering, which we can look at right here. We have the helm, which is the oscillating wilderness opticals, and the bracers, which I have made, are the complicated cuffs. Now, some classes will opt into making the helm because it's a huge stat upgrade. You're making a crafted helm. You're getting a good piece there. That's awesome. Hunter, I don't recommend it because, as we talked about previously, our good 3-tier pieces are helm, shoulders, and gloves. So by crafting the engineering helm, you're opting into wearing chest and legs, which not ideal. They're not good pieces. You're kind of kicking and screaming that you even have to wear one. I wouldn't want to wear two. So with that, you make bracers, and then that leads to the decision to make our Shadow Flame patches or Toxic patches on our belt and boots, because they can't go on rings or necklaces. So that's it for crafted gear. I hope that kind of decides or helps you decide what you want to send for your crafted pieces, because obviously it's a finite resource. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking to spend your sparks, but the TLDR is you're making boots and belt. Whether they're Toxic or Shadow Flame is up to you. I recommend Shadow Flame, but Toxic is going to be a little bit more damage. And then from there, you can go engineering bracers, you can go weapon, you can go Lariat later on in the season. You can craft a ring. The rings are pretty high value because you can put, or there's a socket on them naturally instead of having to put a socket on them. So rings can be a nice like 4th or 5th craft. And then eventually either your chest or pants will be later on down the line. But generally, not to go too far into this, because eventually you can have a crafted item in every piece by the end of the season. Every slot except your 2 slots by the end of the season can be a crafted item. So I think it's more important to figure out what your first couple are, and then the rest kind of, you just fill in the holes with your crit haste pieces everywhere. So we're done with crafted items. Now let's talk about trinkets. Where do we want to go fly and hang out? We'll go sit on top of the auction house while we talk about trinkets. Bang. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through all the dungeons and just pull up the loot tables, and then we'll go through the raid, pull up the loot table, and go through all the trinkets and kind of talk to you about where I think they rank and if they're worth wearing or not. Now, we talked about Drogbar Rocks already at the very beginning of this video. Really good starter trinket, good in single target. You can sim it for the raid. It might be better than you think as you're starting to gear out your character. And like say, especially if you get a World Quest one, like a 411 Drogbar Rocks might be the move over like some 420 trinkets, 430 trinkets while you're gearing out if you don't have optimal stuff. So definitely pick that up. Hold on to it as long as you can. Bang. In here, I'm going to look at Beast Mastery, Marksman, and Survival all specs because some of the range trinkets do function for survival, right? A lot of our spells are not melee spells. Like Bomb, Serpent Sting, Kill Command, all that stuff is not like melee spells. Some of that stuff counts as ranged, and you will proc ranged trinkets as survival. They're typically not great, but it's worth mentioning. So, the Frenzying Signal Flare, this goes into my, like, don't wear this tier. It's just not good enough. It's the stun can also be kind of annoying if you proc it at the wrong time and you end up pushing like a stun DR somewhere. It's just not, it's not good. Doesn't do enough damage. I think this was maybe buffed recently, so it's a little bit better than it was, but I would not recommend this. The Idol of Pure Decay, I actually used this for a while at the beginning of the season because I just couldn't get anything else to drop. This will do like 2% of your damage overall. Not great. Probably falls into a similar tier as a Frenzying Signal Flare. Wouldn't recommend it, but if you happen to loot one while you're trying to like get a bow or something and you don't have other trinkets, you can wear it and it's not terrible. Worth mentioning about this trinket that it can proc on targets that you are not in combat with if you target them. There have been a lot of wizard trinkets that have worked like this. Back in the, not the good old days, back in BFA when I was playing MDI with my healer Edelweiss, there was a trinket from Eternal Palace that procced like this on stuff you were out of combat with, and we would just like, it did the most damage for healers, right? So obviously healers were trying to wear it, but we started pulling all this extra shit, and we were like, man, where is this coming from? We figured out it was that trinket, so we'd have to inspect Edel before every key to make sure she didn't sneak the trinket back on to try to do more damage while we were practicing for these MDI matches and stuff. But this functions in a similar way, in that it can grief you by pulling stuff that you don't want to pull out of combat. So that's it for Brackenhide. Next we have Halls of Infusion. These two trinkets are both not great. Also, Globe of Jagged Ice, it's just, I mean, it does some damage, but it's not worth playing over other stuff that we'll mention later. It's just the damage is not good enough. It takes a while to stack up. It's annoying to trinket to play with. If you do have it, you can just bind this into whatever you want. In my opinion, it's optimal to wait for it to stack to 4 charges to use, but man, just send it. Like, who cares? Iridius Fragment, the base mastery is a big issue with this. Base mastery trinkets, typically, they lose a lot of value for us, especially in Mythic Plus, because mastery just doesn't affect our bombs, which is most of our damage. The 3-minute on use is a little bit awkward as well, because it doesn't really line up with everything. Like, I guess it lines up with every 4th chakram, but not great, put it that way. Every 4th, maybe it's every 5th chakram. I wouldn't recommend this, put it that way. Don't wear this if you don't have to. Could be okay in, like, if you're doing, like, speedy runs in Raid. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten into that, but where you just, like, you just have fun in Heroic and Normal, just, like, literally blasting bosses in under a minute and stuff like that. This is a huge buff on the opener, which most of your damage is coming in a run like that, where it could be good there. So, if that's your vibe and you do weird shit, consider that trinket. Next, we have the Erupting Spear Fragment. I actually think this trinket is super underrated, and it is way better than is listed in most other, I guess, documents or information or guides or sims or whatever. I think this is way better than it gets credit for. I've been using this for the past couple of weeks, and I love it. The trick is you have to have Beastmaster or Marksmanship loot spec. It's a ranged trinket, so it doesn't proc off. Or it doesn't drop if you're survival loot spec. So if you're doing Nelthris, there's no weapon in Nelthris, I would just sit ranged loot spec to try to get this. It lines up with every other chakram, and it is a massive crit buff, because in AoE you're going to hit 5 guys every time. So it's a 3,000 crit buff for 10 seconds. It lasts the duration of chakram. It does a good bit of damage as well. You just send it on single target, who cares? This trinket is very Very good, in my opinion. I think it's underrated. I think it's underutilized. I do recommend this trinket as something to at least experiment with and see if you like it. The negative side of this is it has a minimum range. So you have to like slightly dip out of the pack a lot of times to drop it, which at first was very annoying. And I had this for a while before I started using it and trying it. And because of it being like this, I didn't use it for a while. And then I started using it and was like, oh shit, this is cool. I like this trinket a lot. So do recommend. Try to grab one so you can give it a try. If you don't like it, you don't like it. That's fine. It's not like insanely powerful to the extent that if you don't use this, you're griefing. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that you can make arguments other trinkets are just straight up better, but I like it. Next is the Magma Moth scale. I think this thing sucks. It has a really low range on the effect that lashes out and does damage. And because of lunge, we have larger melee range, so we don't spend a lot of time like really in the pack on top of mobs, especially because of the way bombs work. We kind of position ourselves on the outside of the pack so that when we chuck our bombs, our AoE happens and it hits the whole pack. That's typically how you position as a survival hunter. So there's not really a way to play the game where this is a damage increase because you're sacrificing damage elsewhere because your bombs are just going to miss mobs, right? In order to get the most out of this. And even if you get the most out of this, it doesn't really do enough damage. It was doing less damage than the Idol of Pure Decay for me when I was swapping between the two, kind of trying them out, seeing what was up. I think it sucks. Don't worry about it. So just hit your range loot spec when you're in Nelthris and try to get a spear frag instead. Uldaman, we have the Homeland Raid Horn. I hate this trinket. I think this trinket is a lot worse than it sims at, or it's rated in a lot of different places. I think it's absolute garbage. The damage is split between you and enemies, which means two situations happen. One, you take damage when you use your trinket, or two, you don't take damage. There's two bad parts of this. Is that one, you take damage, and that damage is then split. Like, if it hits you, it doesn't hit other things. So not only are you taking damage, but you're also griefing your own damage by standing in it. And it's really annoying to move in a way where it doesn't hit you. Like, it functions like this boss, or even like the last boss in Freehold, whatever the hell his name is. In that it drops like a big orange circle and then another big orange circle and another big orange circle, and as they're like falling, they do damage. So there's like a little bit of delay on it. I think getting actual value out of this is extremely difficult and annoying and just not worth doing. I turbo pass, hard pass, stamp of disapproval. I hate this trinket. I would not recommend it at all. Freehold, Harlan Sweet, that's the man's name. I don't know why I couldn't remember it. Harlan's Loaded Dice. This trinket's great. This is when it procs mastery, we're a little bit sad because we don't really want that. But especially single target, this trinket's awesome. AoE, it's also quite good as long as you're getting a haste or crit proc. Quite good. Have even considered, I've been going back and forth between playing my Spear Fragment and this, just passive dice versus Spear Frag, and the Fragment's been more fun, so I've been playing the Fragment. I don't really know which is technically better in Mythic Plus. They seem very close in value to me from the dungeons I've run. So with that, it's good. This is a good dungeon trinket to farm. There aren't really great trinkets from the dungeons, so Spear Fragment and Dice are my go-tos when you're just if you're missing on the raid trinkets, or you don't raid, or you don't want to raid. Those are the trinkets I would go for from Mythic Plus, or Dice and Spear Fragment. We have no trinket in the Underrot. We have these two trinkets. Actually, Mark of Dargrul is actually quite good for Mythic Plus as well. This is just a flat damage, and the crit base is fine. We like crit. Just does good damage. This is just a passive does damage trinket. Will likely be in the range of 3% of your damage overall. So pretty good. Nothing to write home about, but pretty good. Naxxra's Spike Tongue. This is primarily a single target trinket. You can get this as a ranged loot spec. It works for survival, but it's going to do no damage because it scales based on how far you are from the target, and its mastery baseline. It's just, don't wear this as survival. So, I don't want to bait anybody into thinking like, let me try range trinkets because I think Spear Fragment's good. Like, this one, not the move. Skip it. And then we have no trinkets and vortex pinnacles. So those are dungeon trinkets. So basically there's 3 trinkets from the dungeons that are worth hunting for. You have spear fragment if you want to play with the unused. And the unused is a little bit annoying, takes a little bit of getting used to. You want to use this with every other death chakram, as the cooldown will line up there, and the duration of this buff along with the death chakram buff lines up. So you want to use it there. Freehold, we have dice, very good passive trinket, and Eltharian's Lair, Mark of Dark Rule, very good passive trinket as well. So those are options there. However, the raid trinkets tend to outshine the dungeon trinkets currently. So unfortunately, that means going into the raid. Good part is the new system means that you can get a 437 or 441 trinket from normal and heroic, which are pretty comparable to the mythic versions, at least now, before the new upgrade track comes out in 10.1.5. So as long as you can get a normal drop, you're pretty chilling on a lot of these. So let's go through these ones that are pretty good. Screaming Black Dragon Scale, I put this in a similar level to the dungeon trinkets. It's just a passive trinket that grants you crit, grants you some leech. The on-use is who cares? You're not going to make use of this on-use ever. Just don't even worry about it. But it's got a pretty high proc rate, and the duration's good. It's just a stat stick. It's very, very similar in value, in my opinion, to the dungeon trinkets. So if you get one of these before the dungeons, send it. This is also something, though, if you're raiding with friends, it's better for other classes. Like, I think a lot of the healers, I know I'm trying to play Resto Druid, and this is, like, insane for Resto Druid. A lot of the healers like this. A lot of classes that like crit a little bit more than us might like this better. And it's very rare, so maybe consider passing on it, especially if you can pass on this to like pick up one of the other trinkets I'll talk about in a sec. That can be a good option. So good, but not great. You have the Pocket Anvil. This is great single target. Not as good in Mythic Plus. It's still good in Mythic Plus, but the problem is we don't cast Raptor Strike and Mongoose Bite very much in AoE at all. So this is mostly a Mythic Plus boss damage trinket, rather than a does anything, any trash, or Mythic Plus boss damage rather than a trash damage trinket, because it pretty much does nothing on trash. Caveat to that being that you pull up to a boss and you have 5 stacks. So it's more powerful in that sense, single target, than it is in a typical raid fight, because you start the fight at max stacks, which is like a 160 or something, 160% increase to the damage that this trinket does. So it's really good on bosses for sure. You can mess around with it depending on how you pull your dungeons. If you do smaller pulls, that leads to probably hitting Raptor Strikes more, which means you might get more value out of this. So worth playing with. I swap to it every once in a while just for fun. Not the biggest fan, but it's certainly good. And I would not underestimate this at all. And definitely, if you get one, definitely try it out. Do not skip this whatsoever. It's worth playing with. Next, we have what I think is our must-have trinket. Our go-to for show trinket is the ominous Chromatic Essence. This is this tier's version of, what was it called? The Icon last season, in that you get a buff, but you also give your friends a buff, and as long as your friends also have the trinket. So eventually your groups are just going to be 5 Chromatic Essences once everybody gets your trinkets, and then you'll pass around enough stats to each other that it's going to be very powerful. You pick which stat you want, and then you share that stat with everybody else, but without any overlaps, right? So ideally your group, you want to have a haste guy, a crit guy, a verse guy, a mastery guy, and then the 5th one is every stat. It's just a 4th of every stat. It's a smaller value of everything that you share with everybody. So ideally we want to be the haste or the crit guy. I have the crit on right now because I think I was playing with the Demon Hunter tank that wanted to have haste on. I was like, sure, man, I'll run crit, whatever. By no means are we ever the mastery dude. There's got to be somebody else to do it, and we'd really like to not be the verse. Haste or crit are going to be a lot better. But verse is okay. If somebody has to be the verse, it's got to be you, fine. But I think this is you want to get your hands on one of these as soon as you can. It's a little bit annoying to set it up. You actually have to fly to different places in Dragonflight to attune to the different dragon aspects or clans or whatever the hell you call them. The flights, that's what it is. So you'll figure out real quick where the where the bronze and emerald ones are, because you swap them between the two quite a bit. But this is the trinket you want. Faux show. I would do normal every week. If you don't have one, make sure you do normal heroic every week. If you can sneak into a mythic first 3, I don't know if mythic first 3s are doing experiments or assault. I haven't really done one yet. I'm not really gonna until Cross Realm opens up. But it's worth trying to get your hands on one of these if you can. Next, we have no trinkets from Assault. We have no trinkets from Rashok. We have Big Boy Trinket from Skarn. Now, I don't have my hands on one of these yet, but when I do, I will definitely be playing this, I think, over my Spear Fragment, at least to begin and see how much damage I can get it to do. This just does damage, and it has crit synergy, which we are stacking quite a bit of crit this season, where the more you crit, the faster the cooldown comes back up, right? It's a 30-second cooldown. You just chuck some bombs out. Does damage. Great. After you crit 60 times, you refresh a charge. So effectively, these are just going to be chucked out forever because you have 3 charges. You're just spamming out bombs. You're critting a million times. You got more bombs coming back, especially with Fury the Eagle, which at low HP has like 100% crit chance, and it ticks a million times. Well, not a million times, but you know what I mean. So you're just going to be swimming in bomb charges. So I can't wait to get one of these. I haven't looted one yet. I've watched some guys play with it. It looks sick. I think this is something that you, again, want to make sure you clear the raid on normal and heroic every week if you can to get one of these. Next, we have Magmarax. This was thought to maybe it was going to be okay. Because, again, a lot of stuff, ranged spells we technically have in our kit. But it was nerfed before the patch came out, and now I don't think it's good at all. I would not hunt for this. I would not try to get this. I would kind of, if you got nothing else, wear it, whatever. But I don't rank this in a high tier whatsoever. Next, we have another trinket that I haven't got my hands on yet, but I think is one of the big boys that I would like to play ideally, right? Like, I think my ideal setup is Essence plus, and then Neltharian's Call to Dominance or Dragon Firebomb Dispenser. This comes with the caveat that you have to play Coordinated Assault to use this trinket. If you're not running Coordinated Assault, which we talked about in the talent videos, you don't necessarily have to. I think it's better in every dungeon, but you don't have to. You can get similar output without Coordinated Assault. But in that case, you're not running this trinket because it only does anything if you run CA. Basically, every time you hit CA, you get a huge agility buff at the cost of a move speed decrease, which in this case, I'll deal with it. I hate the move speed decreases, but we'll deal for this. So this goes into my final build. You want to have one of these end game. So again, on heroic and normal, you want to be doing this every week. Even consider LFR. What's the item level on LFR? 418. This is champion track from LFR. So this is 437 from LFR because it's a super rare trinket. So this is worth doing. You should be doing LFR every week, actually. Man, that's so annoying. But yeah, so every difficulty you can kill this boss on, I would try to kill this boss. And then finally, we have the Beacon to the Beyond. This has some very, very, very powerful niche uses. The trinket's very good. The problem with the trinket for Survival Hunter is that it's mastery base. So it's not in my man, you got to get this thing, but it is a very good trinket if you don't have access to everything. And there are specific situations where it is insanely powerful. There's 2 situations being, I keep coming back to these things in these guides. Vortex Pinnacle last boss and Brackenhide Hall last boss have extreme damage checks on the ads that spawn. Vortex Pinnacle a little bit less so since the nerf. That feels a little bit more fair in that dungeon now. But being able to use this as a way to basically remove one of the ads from being a danger is extremely high value, especially the Brackenhide last boss, Decatriarch or whatever this guy's name is. When this crits, it does over 1 million damage. Those trinkets have 1.5 million on really high keys. So you just kind of remove one every 2.5 minutes, which means you can get 2 in a big tyrannical key. So would definitely roll on this. Maybe don't take it away from your rogues or tanks, because this is extremely powerful for those guys. But yeah, good trinket. Not in our best tier, but very, very good trinket. Probably better than all. Similar to the top dungeon trinkets. I've been running Spear Fragment over this lately. I have a normal one of these, but I'll probably go back and try this out in some other dungeons again. So it's probably in the upper echelon of dungeon trinket tier for me. And then we'll talk about this since we're here. It's not a trinket, but Voice of the Silent Star. This for raw damage is definitely worth it. It's got good stats too on a cloak. Some keys, this could be a little dangerous. No stamina is quite a lot. Like, let's see, when I take my cloak off, how much HP do I lose? I got 583k. I lose 30k HP, which is not a small amount of health. So maybe second guess this. I don't know. When I get one, I'll try it on and see how squishy I actually feel. Because right now I feel pretty tanky on Hunter, which is such a weird thing to say, but I feel pretty tanky on Hunter that I don't know that I want to sacrifice this too much. So I guess that's that. So I guess in review, we'll talk about trinkets. The ones I really like are obviously Netharian's Call to Dominance, the Ominous Chromatic Essence, Dragonflight Bomb Dispenser. I think those are our top 3. And then in the tier just below it, which are things that are fine to wear, are very good trinkets, send them if you got them, would be the Beacon to the Beyond. And then if we go to the dungeons, things on a similar tier are the Erupting Spear Fragment from Neltharis, Harlan's Loaded Dice from Freehold, and the Mark of Dargrul from Netharian Slayer. So that's kind of your options. If you got to wear other stuff because you just don't have the pieces, fine. But ideally those, what was it, 6, 7 trinkets are the ones you're looking to wear as your Mythic Plus trinkets. So you got quite a bit of options, and I don't think any of these are really that far ahead of the other options, right? So you can kind of mix and match, do what you got to do, whatever. In Raid, it's going to be a little bit different, but in Raid, you can sim. I know most of this I've talked about Mythic Plus. I will. I think there's a video I can find that I'll link in the description that teaches you how to sim your character on Raid bots, and I would utilize that immensely if you're worried about your Raid damage. This Raid is, in particular, really good to sim because it's mostly a single target raid, and the simulation program has the most success in being accurate when you just have one boss you're hitting. You know how long the fight's going to be. It'll tell you what trinket's better. Bam, bam, bam. You don't really have to think about anything. So I'll link in the description below. I will put a link to a video from, I'll find a good one, that has a little guide on how to sim your character if you don't know how to do that already. For Mythic Plus, it's a little bit more difficult to do. There are ways to do it, but I'm not totally sold on the process yet, so that's why I wanted to make this video and share with you guys what I thought about this stuff. So yeah, that's it. I hope you guys like this video. This is, again, I'm kind of giving a shot this long form content that's atypical from kind of what other content creators make for this kind of thing, and I'm always happy to answer these questions in stream as well. I'll put a link to that down below. Granted, I haven't been playing Hunter that much the past couple weeks, but this coming week and I think the week after, we're going to get back to pushing Mythic Plus again now that my alts are caught up. So if you like the video, please like the video. It helps me out. Consider subscribing to the channel. I'm hoping to do some more stuff for survival here. I actually don't know what my next video is going to be, so if you guys have any ideas or recommendations or things you specifically would like to see a video on for Survival Hunter or for any of the alt characters I'm playing Warrior, Druid, and Rogue as well right now. So if you have questions on those, I don't know that I'm ready to do content on them yet, but depending on what you guys leave as far as feedback in the comments go, maybe I will. And as always, if you didn't like the video, tell me to go fuck myself. That's fine. Let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.